I came in with the Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I hope to go out with it. The Almighty might have said, two unaccountable freaks have come in together, and they must go out together. Guess whose words these are? None other than Samuel Langhorne Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, the American humorist and writer. Mark Twain has an unusual pen name which actually is not a proper noun. It is a cry that the riverboat pilots would give out as they look for a safe landing place. Now, Mark Twain was born by the river Mississippi. The river Mississippi was part and parcel of his life. Probably he felt the river flowing through his very veins. That's why he depicted it so beautifully in his stories. His stories, unforgettable characters. The adventures of Tom Sawyer, adventures of Huckleberry Finn. How can we forget those marvelous characters who literally jumped out of the pages and made the stories come alive? Yes, Mark Twain was always full of life. He did a lot of things in his lifetime. In fact, he started off his career as an apprentice to a printer. He started his work as a typesetter. He went on to try his hand later at riverboat piloting. He tried mining, gold mining, and then he came back to journalism. So you can see he's had a wide range of experience. Mark Twain could never say no to a new venture or a new challenge. So he also found himself getting into a lot of business ventures that were unprofitable to him. Writing was his calling, but not business. Well, how did he kickstart his career? He finally decided that journalism was his place and writing was his calling. He started writing as a reporter to a local newspaper. And it happened one day that he wrote about the jumping frog of Calaveras County. Very, very unusual name, but it gave him a jump right into the eye of the public as a humorist par excellence. This humor is an innate part of his character, and it is something that does not come really with practice. Maybe it is experience, observation, lots of things put together. He was known for his cutting wit, but a wit that was always tempered with a laugh at himself, as that quote about Halley's tells us. Kings, royalty, presidents, industrialists, they were all his friends. They loved that humor that really peps up life. And Samuel Clemens started his career with light-hearted verse, but he later moved on and brought a little bit of social satire into his writing. A strong narrative, a rich sense of humor, and a little bit of observation on the weaknesses in our society made him a writer, an American novelist who started, in fact, the trend of the great American novel. What we can expect today is the unexpected. Because here is Mark Twain starting off a moral story and turning it upside down. Yes, all of us have had times when we have had to hear all the sermons from our grown-ups. Not very happy about it, but we had to quietly listen and say yes to everything they said. Maybe Mark Twain had one of those unforgettable moments in his childhood. So it happens that the experience was not a happy one, and he decided to come out with a story that talks about a little bad boy. Maybe we could begin the story like this. There never was a bad James in those Sunday school books as bad as that wicked Jim with a lucky streak. He said that all the Sunday school heroes usually had the name James, and they met a very bad death because they were wicked. The hero of this story is Jim. And the story is all about his life. Well, how did Jim start off life? Jim's life was rather uneventful, the usual kind that every boy has, but an unusually different kind of parenting. His mother took things easy. She didn't really cuddle him or make a fuss about him or pamper him as mothers usually do. Well, he got a lot of spanking and a box or two on his ears from time to time. But he was all in all a happy kid. As he was going about his merry way, he was also looking and observing things around him. And he had a special fondness for that homemade jam. He discovered the pantry keys, opened the door, stole a lot of the jam, ate it to his heart's content. And it doesn't end there. He filled it up with dirt, shut the jar and kept it there. What do you think should happen? Mother should get him, give him a good thrashing of a lifetime? No, it doesn't turn out that way for lucky old Jim. Nothing happens. He gets away with his crime. I wonder if you remember Tom Sawyer and his Aunt Polly. Remember what a tyrant she was? Yeah, she would not allow poor Tom Sawyer to take a break from school. Or, as we say nowadays, to bunk a class or two. She was always there behind Tom Sawyer, discovering all his tricks and mischief and putting him back in order. Well, this Jim didn't have a mother like that. His mother let him do just as he pleased. Another thing that he noticed in his career, his short childhood, was that he got on to Farmer Acorn's apple tree one day, enjoying a feast of those ripe, luscious apples, and a little fear struck him. He was wondering, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. Any moment this branch may break and I may drop down, dead perhaps. But nothing like that happened. He feasted on those apples, got off the apple tree, wiped his hands and his mouth clean, and walked away from the scene of crime. Well, there are countless incidents of the little bad boy's childhood. Right from small pranks like this, he got into more serious crime. Well, you can't call it crime exactly. When a person gets caught, we say it's a crime. But when you get away with it, everyone, generally laughs it off. Little bad boy Jim had his eye on his teacher's penknife that she had tucked away in her purse. His little hands reached out, picked that penknife, quietly put it away. The teacher started frantically searching for the knife. And what should he do but quietly hide it in George's hat? Now, George was a good boy of the class, a totally innocent do-gooder who would, for the life of him, not do anything bad or wicked. Well, the crime was planted on George. George could not say a word. He blushed, he wept, he stood there quietly taking all the blame while Lucky Jim got away. Crime doesn't end there for Lucky Jim. He goes on missing Sunday church. He goes boating on Sunday, ignoring the Sabbath day, which in the 19th century America was a pretty important tradition. Sunday was the time everyone attended church religiously. Well, not Lucky Jim. He was away boating and nothing happened to him. One fine Sunday, he also stole his father's gun and went off hunting, boxed his sister's ear, and didn't care a fig about what happened to her. He had broken a golden rule of keeping the Sabbath day holy, but still, nothing ever happened to him. And life moves on from bad to worse to worst. Lucky Jim at sea enjoyed a happy, adventurous, free life, comes back home, has a huge drink at the bar and ends up in the police station. And that's where his family finds him. A wife with a number of kids. He starts making life miserable for them. And before you know it, he has axed them off, killed them off, and without a pang of his conscience, goes on to make a lot of money. Lucky Jim it was. He couldn't care less. He just got things out of his way and went ahead. Lucky Jim went on to become legislator, and he was universally respected. So that is Lucky Jim for you. Well, what does the story prove? We always reach the end of the story and say, well, what does it say? When I read it for the first time, I was indignant and angry. Perhaps I've taken my stereotypical role as teacher very seriously. So when I saw this bad little boy getting away with all that crime, I was really angry and, my blood was boiling at such a life. But then, look at it from Mark Twain's point of view. What did he see? Well, what he liked about this boy was his success story. And moreover, he was making a very important observation on life. Humorously put, but a matter of relevance that we see even today. Somehow breaking up a beautiful story of Mark Twain and explaining it can sometimes remove the beauty out of it. But then we can't help it. Let's just try to make it interesting and enjoyable as well. I looked at the story this way. I basically could not make sense, as I told you earlier, about a life that ran on this way. So I was wondering, what could this man be saying through such a life? And I analyzed it, broke it up, and saw that it had a kind of a three-part structure. The initial part is his childhood and his school days. an important observation that Lucky Jim makes after his episode with poor old George. He makes an observation that says, nothing like it was in any of the Sunday school books. What he means by Sunday school books here basically is a moral story. What happened to poor George? George was the victim. George was too good to blame someone else. George could not understand what was happening. But just watch Lucky Jim. Look at his smart, quick thinking. Smart, if we can call it, it's a nice word to be using. But his quick thinking and his sly movements, he gets rid of the evidence and plants it on George. George gets all the punishment. Nobody even stops to think and say, but George is a good boy. George would not do a thing like that. It could be a mistake. No way. People just saw the evidence and they saw the crime. They did not examine or think of the person who did it or the motive behind the crime. So Lucky Jim got away and George was known to be a petty thief. That was one incident that we see in Module 1, where the typical moral story is taken and turned upside down. So that is how he launches on his career of crime. Just remember, even back home, things were not really very strict or disciplined. His mother just let him do things the way he did, but if he did get into her way, he got out of it with a spanking or two. The second thing that he noticed was up there on Farmer Acorn's tree. He was not supposed to be there. That was not his tree. Those were not his apples. He was supposed to get punished, like all the books said. You know, if you do something bad, you get punished for it. But he enjoyed the treat, and he came down happier than ever. Not even a tummy upset to trouble him. So look, here he is enjoying the crime. Yet again, he has another chance to see if what the books say is really true. He goes out on a Sunday. If you've read Tom Sawyer, then you know how strict Auntie Polly was about Sundays. Tom Sawyer had to be at his cleanest best. He had to be well behaved. He was scrubbed clean the night before, and he had to wear that stiff starched shirt with his bow tie in place and go about in shoes that he was so very uncomfortable in. That was how most people observed Sabbath. They came out in their best. Lucky Jim didn't even observe Sabbath. He went out boating. And then he was like looking, oh my gosh, he knew that he was doing something wrong. Is the boat going to sink? Or, I don't know what's going to happen. Is one of us going to die or something? Well, the storybook said that there would be a bolt of lightning and he would be struck dead. Something like the, childish stories we hear, there's a booth round the corner, or, take care, if you do this, that's going to happen to you. Don't you try anything funny. But very early, Jim got rid of all those fancy ideas. He lost his fear of the bolt from the blue. And the next crime was taking away his father's gun and going off hunting. So one adventure after another. Off he goes hunting, comes back home safe and sound after enjoying a jolly good Sunday out there. This was childhood and boyhood for Lucky Jim. He did pretty much what he liked to do. Well, the moral story is turned it's turned upside down. And this is exactly what Mark Twain set out to do. Yeah, when fear goes out, what comes in? Well, he got bolder and bolder. Fear of what people say, fear of punishment, fear of God. What is this fear of God? The best that Lucky Jim could understand of it was, you do bad and God punishes you. That's what fear of God is. Well, this is exactly the message that all the moralizers were conveying to him, and in his own childish way, this is what he grasped or understood of the whole idea of a moral standard that people around him were following. Why did you not do good? Or why did you do bad? We are afraid of it because we are afraid that people may say, oh, he's a little bad boy, or we are afraid that God will punish us. This is how a child looks at it. Very early, Lucky Jim got out of his childish fears. He did not understand that the fear of God goes beyond just punishment. Fear would involve understanding the goodness and justice of God, a justice that was merciful. Well, I'm not moralizing here, but this was the kind of moral education that Lucky Jim had acquired from the grown-ups around him. So all that he could see was an equation that says God equals punishment. So fear of God means getting afraid of that angry God out there. When he saw that there was nothing happening, no bolt from the blue, no sinking boat, no hurt limbs, nothing ever happened, he just went his jolly old way because he thought, well, nothing can touch me. And he did not understand the whole idea of fear of God because what he gathered from his experience was just this. Divine retribution or punishment didn't come Lucky Jim's way, so error became habit and habit led on to crime. We can't call him a hardened criminal. He didn't have those rough and angry looks. He enjoyed life. He liked doing what he was doing. And as an adult also, he loved his work. He was at sea and he liked his work out there. It was only when he came back home, he continued his old habits of drinking and then found himself on the wrong side of the law. And there he was behind the bars. Whatever the reason may be, a family fight, and he recklessly kills the whole family off. That's the way Mark Twain puts it anyway. What happens after this? Lucky Jim just goes on his merry way, making a lot of money. Can this kind of thing be stopped? Can people go on being bad? Yes, of course, they can. If they cover it up with a lot of respectability. Money, power, respect. Everyone knows him now as the Honorable Jim. He's a well-respected man of society. His past crimes are forgotten. Forgiven, we do not know, but forgotten, definitely. Mark Twain has seen that the child has learned his lesson really well and has stepped into manhood, knowing that money, power, respectability are all things that can be bought, and he buys the respect from the other people. Does he live happily ever after? Yes, he does. He goes on to becoming the legislator of the governing body. Legislator? A man who breaks rules? Of course, there's something that is not very strange to our ears. I'm sure all of us read those newspaper reports, and we do hear of cases of success that have started out pretty bad and continue to enjoy success in spite of bad ways. You can also sense a secret admiration in the way Mark Twain deals with this character. What does he admire? All that we can see is cruelty. A character who is getting more and more self-centered, more and more cruel. But that is not what he glimpses. What he sees is the bottom line, and the bottom line in life is, was the person a success or a failure? The answer is, Lucky Jim was a success, and nothing succeeds like success. What does Lucky Jim do to make himself so successful? Nothing much, really. He has decided to make things work out for himself. He's not going to play things by the rule, but he's going to get what he wants from life. We have all these rogues who seem to be enjoying life. And let me pick up one literary character from a famous book called Gone with the Wind. This man's name was Rhett Butler. Do you remember the twin combination of Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler? Both of them unscrupulous free traders. It was the time of the Civil War. The states were fighting amongst themselves. There were the two groups, pro-slavery and anti-slavery. Rhett Butler, Scarlett O'Hara didn't care who was fighting who. All they saw was war made good business. So they took advantage of people's needs, stocked up goods, and made a whole pile of money out of what we would call today black marketing. Rhett Butler was a dashing hero. He looked good. He dressed up well. He had a lovely grand house and a lot of guests whom he would invite. And he had dances and invited all the famous people of town. And they had to be seen at Rhett's parties. That was Rhett Butler. And Scarlett O'Hara was the emancipated woman of that century. She went right out there. She was looking after her family because her father was no more, her mother had died, her husband also went to war and had lost his life, and she had to take care of the family. But she just didn't sit back and make a penny or two. She wanted a lot of money, and she did it the Scarlet way. We can't help but admire such crooks because there's a lot of color in them, there's a lot of life and vivacity and liveliness, and we look at them and sometimes wonder, what have we missed in life? I think Mark Twain was trying to look at the other side of things. So give him a chance, folks. He was not for the moral story. Maybe he had one moral story too many in his own childhood. So this was his own way of getting back. No, jokes aside, he was using the moral story to emphasize the other side of life, the way life really works out.